We're passing the car his parents gave you. Liam needs it more than you do now. My mother said it like she was offering me tea. Casual, matter of fact. Like she hadn't just announced in the middle of my wedding reception that she was taking back the only reliable thing I owned and handing it to my younger brother. I stood there in my dress, holding a champagne flute I hadn't even sipped from, and I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. Sarah Clark, my mother, 58 years old, wearing the pale blue dress I'd helped her pick out, smiling like she'd just done me a favor. My name is Chloe Clark. I'm 32. I work as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm downtown. I'm good at what I do. I'm careful. I plan. I save. I've always been the one who had everything together, at least on paper. And on this day, the day I married Daniel Hayes, the man I'd been with for 4 years, I should have felt like the world was finally mine. But all I could think about was the car. It's strange, isn't it? How a single sentence can crystallize a lifetime of neglect. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, the one who always had to earn their place, then you already know how this feels. Stay with me, because this story isn't about the car. It's about what happens when the invisible finally decides to be seen. If you want to see how this ends, please consider liking and subscribing. The car wasn't even really a gift. Daniel's parents had given it to me 3 years ago when my old one died. They were kind people, practical. They said, "You need something dependable, Chloe." And I did. I drove it to work every day. I kept it clean. I changed the oil on time. I took care of it the way I took care of everything else in my life. And now my mother was taking it back, not asking, announcing. Liam's been having trouble getting to his shifts, she continued, still smiling. You understand, don't you? You've got Daniel now. You'll be fine. Liam, 29, still living at home, still bouncing between part-time jobs and big ideas that never landed. Still the favorite. I looked past her, toward the corner of the room where Liam stood, laughing with one of Daniel's cousins. He didn't even glance my way. He didn't need to. He knew the car was already his. Isn't that generous of us, Chloe? My mother asked, tilting her head like she was waiting for applause. I nodded, just once. My throat felt tight, but my face stayed calm. Of course, I said. Whatever Liam needs. She squeezed my arm, satisfied, and walked away to refill her wine glass. I stood there for a moment longer, watching her go. My father was across the room, talking to Daniel's dad. He hadn't said a word. He never did. Not when it came to Liam. Not when it came to me. Daniel appeared at my side, his hand warm on my lower back. You okay? He asked quietly. I turned to him and smiled, the same smile I'd been wearing all day. I'm fine, I said. And I was. I was fine. I'd been fine my whole life. But something shifted in that moment, something small and cold and sharp. The car was the least of what they owed me, and I would collect on all of it. The car wasn't the first thing they'd taken from me. It was just the most recent. I learned early that being the responsible one meant being the one who got less. When I was 14, I won a scholarship to a summer math program, full ride, room and board included. My mother smiled when I showed her the letter. But 2 days later, she sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "We need to talk about Liam's tuition." He'd failed 2 classes that semester. Again. The school required him to attend summer remedial courses or he couldn't move up to 10th grade. The cost was $1,200. You understand, don't you? She asked. The math program is just for fun. Liam needs this. I went to the local library that summer instead. I checked out books on calculus and taught myself. Liam went to summer school and still barely passed. That was the pattern. I achieved. Liam struggled, and somehow, his struggle always cost more than my success was worth. When I graduated high school with honors, my parents took me to dinner at a chain restaurant. When Liam finally graduated 2 years later, they threw him a backyard party with a DJ and catering. He invited 40 people. I helped set up the tables. He worked so hard to get here, my mother said, watching him laugh with his friends. We're so proud. I'd worked hard too. But my hard work was expected. His was celebrated. By the time I was 25, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a small condo. I was so careful with money. I tracked every expense. I packed lunches. I drove that old car until it literally wouldn't start anymore. I told my parents about the condo over Sunday dinner. My father nodded. My mother said, "That's nice, honey." Then she turned to Liam and asked if he'd thought any more about that business idea he'd mentioned. The one that needed $10,000 in startup capital. The one that would fail 6 months later, just like the two before it. They gave him the money. From the account they'd been saving for family emergencies. I bought the condo on my own. I always did everything on my own. The house was the bigger issue. The family house, the one my parents bought 30 years ago in a neighborhood that had quietly become valuable. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a garage, worth close to $500,000 now. My mother mentioned it once, years ago, when I just started dating Daniel. She said, "When we're gone, you and Liam will split everything equally. We've made sure of that." I believed her. I didn't want the house particularly, but I believed in the principle. Equal. Fair. Then last Thanksgiving, my father and I were doing dishes while everyone else watched football in the living room. He was rinsing. I was drying. And he said, almost casually, "Your mother and I have been talking. We think Liam should have the house when we're gone." I stopped mid-motion, plate in hand. "He needs stability," my father continued, not looking at me. "Something solid to build on. You've got your career. You'll be fine." I set the plate down carefully. "And me?" I asked. He shrugged. "We'll leave you something. Don't worry. Something. Not half. Something." I didn't argue. I just nodded and kept drying dishes. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing didn't change anything. It just made me look difficult. But I remembered. I remembered every single time they chose him over me. Every time my needs were optional and his were urgent. Every time I was told to understand, to be flexible, to be the bigger person. They had mistaken my silence for acceptance. They were about to learn the difference. Daniel was asleep when I got home from the reception. We'd left early. I told him I was tired. He believed me because I'm always honest with him about the small things. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of tea I didn't drink. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. I opened my financial files, the ones I kept meticulously organized in color-coded folders: income, expenses, savings, investments. I wasn't crying. I don't cry often. Instead, I was doing what I always did when things felt out of control. I was organizing, calculating, planning. Daniel wouldn't understand this. Not really. He came from a family that functioned the way families are supposed to function. His parents loved him and his sister equally. They celebrated both their achievements. They helped both of them when they struggled. When I tried to explain my family to him, he listened and nodded and said all the right things. But I could see the confusion in his eyes. He couldn't imagine parents who played favorites so openly. "They'll come around," he'd said once. "They just don't see it yet." But they did see it. That was the problem. They saw me clearly. They just didn't value what they saw. I pulled up a separate document, one I'd started years ago but never finished. A timeline of every financial decision my parents had made regarding me and Liam. Every loan, every gift, every bailout. I'd been tracking it loosely, almost unconsciously. The way you track things that hurt, but you're not ready to confront. Now, I was ready. I added the car to the list. 3-year-old sedan, estimated value $4,000, given to me by in-laws, taken by parents, reassigned to Liam. Then I went further back. The summer program, the graduation party, the business investments, the emergency fund withdrawals. I listed every single instance I could remember. Some of them I had documentation for: bank statements, emails, text messages. Others were just memories, but I wrote them down anyway. The total came to over $60,000. Money that had gone to Liam that should have been split equally. Money that had been given freely to him, while I was expected to earn every cent on my own. $60,000. And that didn't include the house. I opened a new browser tab and searched for the county property records. It took me a few minutes to navigate the website, but I found it. The deed to my parents' house, purchased in 1995 for $92,000. Current estimated value $470,000. I studied the document. The ownership was listed as joint tenancy between Sarah Clark and Robert Clark, my mother and father. That was normal, expected. But then I noticed something in the property tax records. A line item I almost missed, a homestead exemption filed 2 years ago, and listed as a co-resident for tax purposes, was Liam Clark. I clicked on the exemption details. Co-residents could be listed if they contributed to the household or if the property was being prepared for transfer to avoid estate taxes. It was a legal loophole, a way to start shifting ownership without officially changing the deed. My hands went still on the keyboard. They weren't just planning to give him the house. They were already protecting it, making sure that when the time came, the transfer would be clean. No estate taxes, no complications, no splitting it with me. I sat back in my chair. The tea had gone cold. The apartment was still quiet. Daniel shifted in the bedroom. I heard the mattress creak, but he didn't wake up. I looked at the screen, at the careful documentation of my parents' plan, the plan they'd never told me about, the plan they'd been building for years while I worked and saved and believed that fairness would eventually come. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was a conspiracy. My mother called 3 days after the wedding. I was at my desk at work reviewing a client portfolio when her name lit up my phone screen. I almost didn't answer, but old habits are hard to break. "Chloe, honey, do you have a minute?" Her voice was bright, too bright, the tone she used when she wanted something. "I'm at work, Mom. What do you need?" "It's about Liam. He's got this amazing opportunity. A food truck business, farm-to-table concept. Very trendy right now." I set down my pen. I'd heard this before. Different business, same story. "Okay," I said. "He needs a small loan to get started. Just $15,000. But the bank won't approve him without a cosigner, someone with good credit." There it was, the ask, the reason for the call. "Why won't they approve him?" I asked. "Oh, you know how banks are. They're so picky about credit history." "What's his credit score?" She paused. "I don't know the exact number." "Roughly." "Chloe, that's not the point." "It is the point, Mom. If the bank won't lend to him, there's a reason. He's had some bad luck, a few missed payments, nothing serious." "How many businesses has he started in the last 5 years?" Another pause, longer this time. "That's not fair. He's been trying to find his path." "How many, Mom?" "3. But this one is different. He's really passionate about it." I looked out the window of my office. The city stretched out below, clean lines, organized streets, everything in its place. "And the other 3? Was he passionate about those too?" "Chloe, I don't appreciate your tone. I'm just asking questions. If I'm going to co-sign a $15,000 loan, I need to understand the risk." "He's your brother. Family helps family." "I help myself, Mom. I work 60 hours a week. I pay my own bills. I save my own money. When have you ever asked Liam to help me?" "That's different. You don't need help." "Because I never get any." The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing. I could picture her standing in the kitchen, gripping the phone, trying to decide whether to guilt me or scold me. She chose guilt. "After everything we've done for you, after we raised you and supported you, this is how you treat your family?" My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed calm. "What have you done for me, Mom, specifically?" "We gave you a home. We fed you. We sent you to school. You were legally required to do those things. I'm asking what you've done that you didn't also do for Liam. What have you given me that you didn't give him double?" "This isn't a competition, Chloe." "You're right, it's not. Because if it were, I'd have lost a long time ago." "I can't believe you're being so selfish." "I'm not co-signing the loan, Mom." "Chloe, no. He's 29 years old. If he can't get a loan on his own, maybe he shouldn't be starting another business. It's the least you can do for your brother. The least I can do. As if I hadn't already done enough. As if my entire life hadn't been shaped around making things easier for him. I have to get back to work, I said. Chloe, please. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. My hand didn't shake. My breath stayed even. I set the phone face down on my desk and looked at the property documents I'd printed that morning. The deed, the tax records, the homestead exemption with Liam's name carefully listed. They wanted a co-signer. Fine. I would co-sign their downfall. Liam showed up at my office 2 days later. I was in a meeting with a client when my assistant knocked on the glass door and mouthed that my brother was in the lobby. She looked uncomfortable. That told me everything I needed to know. I excused myself and walked out to find him pacing near the reception desk. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans. His hair looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. Everyone in the lobby could see him. Everyone could hear him. Chloe, finally. I've been waiting for 20 minutes. I was in a meeting, Liam. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you about the loan. I kept my voice low, professional. We can talk outside. No, we can talk right here. You're my sister. Why are you making this so difficult? The receptionist looked down at her desk. A colleague walking past slowed their steps, pretending to check their phone. I felt the eyes on us, the judgment forming, the embarrassment settling over the clean, quiet space I'd built for myself. But I didn't feel what I used to feel. I didn't feel the panic or the shame or the desperate need to fix it. I just felt tired. Liam, I told Mom I'm not co-signing. That's my decision. It's $15,000. You make that in like 2 months. That's not the point. Then what is the point? That you're better than me? That you've got your fancy job and your fancy life and I'm just the screw-up? His voice was getting louder. People were definitely listening now. I didn't say any of that. You didn't have to. You've always thought you were better than me. I looked at him. Really looked at him. 29 years old. Still expecting someone else to solve his problems. Still playing the victim. Still using guilt as currency. Tell me about the food truck, I said. He blinked. What? The business? Tell me about it. What's your business plan? Your target market? Your startup cost breakdown? I don't need to explain myself to you. If I'm going to co-sign a loan, I need to understand the business. It's farm to table. Local ingredients, healthy options. People love that stuff. Where will you park it? Downtown, near the offices. Have you applied for a vendor permit? He hesitated. I'm working on it. How much is the permit? I don't know yet. What about insurance? Equipment costs? Food supplier contracts? Chloe, stop interrogating me. I'm asking basic questions. If you can't answer them, you're not ready to start a business. His face flushed red. You know what? Forget it. I don't need your help. I don't need your judgment. I'll figure it out on my own like I always do. You've never figured it out on your own, Liam. Someone always bails you out. Yeah? Well, maybe if I had a sister who actually cared about me, I wouldn't be in this position. Maybe if you took responsibility for your own choices, you wouldn't need a sister to save you. He stared at me. I could see the anger, the hurt, the realization that I wasn't going to bend. I'm telling Dad about this, he said. Okay. I'm serious. He's going to hear how selfish you're being. That's fine. He stood there for another moment, waiting for me to crack, to apologize, to change my mind. But I just looked at him, calm, steady, done. He turned and walked toward the elevator. I watched him go. My assistant appeared at my side. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I'm fine, I said. And I was. I stood there, watching him walk away. And the only thing I felt was a strange kind of pity. Not for him, but for the person I used to be. The one who would have given in. When does responsibility for a toxic family member end? When do you finally cut the cord? I'm genuinely curious what you would have done in that moment. I invited them to dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. Neutral territory. I told my mother it was time we talked things through properly. She sounded relieved on the phone, like she thought I was finally coming around. They arrived 10 minutes late. My father ordered a scotch before he even sat down. My mother smiled too brightly and asked about Daniel. I answered politely and waited for the server to leave. Then I pulled out the folder. "What's that?" my mother asked. "A breakdown of Liam's financial history over the last 7 years." My father's hand paused halfway to his glass. I opened the folder and laid out 3 pages of spreadsheets. Clean columns, clear numbers, every loan, every bailout, every failed business venture documented with dates and amounts. In total, you've given Liam $63,000. That doesn't include the car or the house arrangements. My mother's smile faded. "Chloe, what is this?" "It's the truth. I thought you should see it written out." "We don't need a spreadsheet to understand our own family." "I think you do. Because if you understood what you were doing, you'd stop." My father took a long drink. "This is inappropriate." "Is it? You asked me to co-sign a $15,000 loan. I'm showing you why that's a bad investment." "He's not an investment. He's your brother." "And what am I?" The question hung there. My mother looked down at the table. My father looked at his drink. "You're our daughter," my mother said finally. "Of course you are. Then why have you spent $63,000 on him and nothing on me?" "You don't need it. You're doing fine." "That's not the point. The point is you've never even offered. You've never asked if I needed help. You just assumed I'd figure it out on my own." "You always do figure it out. That's who you are." "Because I had to be. Because if I wasn't, I'd have nothing." My father set his glass down hard. "What do you want from us, Chloe? An apology? Money? What?" "I want you to see what you've done. Not just to me, to him. You've taught Liam that failure has no consequences, that someone will always catch him. You've made him dependent. We've supported him through difficult times. You've enabled him. There's a difference." My mother's eyes filled with tears. The performance I'd seen 100 times. "I can't believe you're being so heartless." "I'm being honest." "You're being cruel." "No, cruel is watching your daughter work herself to exhaustion and never once asking if she's okay. Cruel is taking back a car on her wedding day. Cruel is planning to give away a house she's supposed to inherit and not even telling her." My father's jaw tightened. "How do you know about that?" "I looked at the property records. You listed Liam as a co-resident for the homestead exemption. You're already setting up the transfer. That's our business. It's my business too. I'm your daughter. I'm supposed to be part of this family. You are part of this family. Then treat me like it." The server appeared to take our order. None of us had looked at the menu. My mother waved her away. "This is about money," my father said. "That's all this is to you. Numbers on a page." "This is about fairness. This is about being seen." "You want to be seen? Fine. I see you. I see someone who's so focused on her spreadsheets and her career that she can't even help her own brother. I see someone who's so focused on Liam that you forgot you have a daughter." My father leaned forward. His voice was low and tight. "You'll never understand what it's like to truly need help, Chloe. You're too cold." I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework and told me I could be anything I wanted. The man who'd stopped seeing me somewhere along the way. I had needed help my whole life. They just hadn't been the ones to give it. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, because I was finally clear. For 32 years, I'd been trying to earn something that was never going to be given. Love, respect, equality. I'd worked harder, achieved more, stayed quieter, hoping that one day they'd look at me and see what I'd always been, their daughter. Not just the responsible one, not just the one who didn't need help, their daughter. But they were never going to see it. And somewhere between the restaurant and my apartment, I stopped needing them to. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and the folder of documents I'd been building. Daniel was asleep in the bedroom. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic outside. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is hot and reactive and exhausting. What I felt was cold and precise. I felt like myself, like the financial analyst I'd trained to be, someone who looked at numbers and patterns and found the truth hiding in the details. I opened the spreadsheet I'd shown my parents. $63,000, 7 years, 4 failed businesses, one dependent adult who'd never learned to stand on his own because he'd never had to. But the money wasn't the real issue. Money could be earned back. The real issue was the house, $470,000, the only asset my parents had that was supposed to be split equally between me and Liam. The asset they were quietly planning to give entirely to him. I pulled up the property records again. I'd looked at them a dozen times, but this time I went deeper. I clicked through the deed history, the original purchase document from 1995, the refinancing in 2003, the homestead exemption filed 2 years ago with Liam listed as a co-resident. Then I found something I'd missed before, a clause buried in the original deed, standard language that most people never read. It stated that any major financial transaction involving the property, including sale or transfer of ownership, required the signatures of all legal heirs if the property was held in family trust. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. My parents had set up the deed as a family trust when they bought the house. It was a common estate planning tool. It meant that when they died, the property would pass to their children without going through probate. But it also meant that any changes to the trust, any transfers or sales, required the consent of all beneficiaries. All beneficiaries. That included me. They couldn't give the house to Liam without my signature. I sat back in my chair. The weight of it settled over me like a blanket. Not heavy, comforting. They had spent years building a plan, listing Liam as a co-resident, setting up the tax exemptions, preparing the paperwork. They'd been so careful, so methodical. They'd thought of everything, except me. They'd forgotten that I was more than just the daughter who didn't need help. I was the daughter who read contracts, who understood legal language, who knew how to find the details that mattered. They had forgotten I was a signature. I looked at the screen, at the clause that changed everything, at the leverage I didn't know I had until this moment. My revenge couldn't be about making them love me. That was never going to happen. It had to be about making them face what they'd done, making them see the cost of their choices, not just to me, to Liam, to themselves. I closed the laptop. The apartment was still quiet. Daniel was still asleep. The world outside kept moving, but inside, something had shifted. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the one who accepted and adapted and stayed silent. I was the one holding all the cards, and I was finally ready to play them. I spent the next 3 days digging, not just into the property records, but into everything: bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts. My parents had always been private about their finances, but I knew where to look. I knew the tricks people used to hide money. I'd spent years helping clients navigate complex financial situations. This was no different, except it was my family. And the numbers told a story I hadn't expected. The property tax discrepancy I'd found earlier was just the beginning. When I cross-referenced the homestead exemption with their reported income, something didn't add up. They'd claimed financial hardship to qualify for a reduced property tax rate, but their income shouldn't have qualified them for that exemption. So I went deeper. I requested copies of their tax returns through a legal records request. It took 2 days, but I got them. 5 years of returns, clean, organized, filed by a professional accountant, and completely inconsistent with the story they'd been telling. According to their tax returns, my parents had been liquidating assets for the past 3 years. Stocks, bonds, a small rental property I didn't even know they owned. The total came to just over $200,000. $200,000 that hadn't gone to Liam, that hadn't gone to medical bills or home repairs or any of the emergencies they'd claimed over the years. I traced the withdrawals. Most of them went into a separate savings account, one that wasn't listed on any of the documents they'd shown me when we'd talked about the estate plan years ago. I pulled up the account details. The balance was $173,000. They weren't broke. They weren't struggling. They were building a retirement fund, a comfortable one, while telling me they couldn't afford to help Liam without my co-signature, while telling me the house had to go to him because they had nothing else to give. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was quiet. Daniel was at work. I had the place to myself, just me and the numbers that refused to lie. They'd been playing poor, playing desperate, playing the guilt card with surgical precision. And it had worked. For years, it had worked. I'd believed them. I'd felt sorry for them. I'd felt guilty for having more than they did. But they didn't have less. They had plenty. They just wanted more. They wanted the house to go to Liam and the savings to fund their retirement, and me to stay quiet and grateful for whatever scraps they decided to throw my way. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was financial. It was calculated. It was a con. I printed out the bank statements, the tax returns, the property records. I organized them in a clean folder with labeled tabs, everything documented, everything clear. My mother had called me heartless at the restaurant. My father had called me cold. They'd made it sound like I was the problem, like my need for fairness was somehow cruel. But this wasn't about fairness anymore. This was about fraud. This was about two people who'd manipulated their daughter for years while secretly hoarding money and planning to cut her out entirely. I looked at the folder on my desk. Neat, professional, damning. The game wasn't about who they loved more. It was about who they thought was too stupid to look at the numbers. And they'd bet on the wrong daughter. I called Marcus Chen on a Tuesday morning. He was a colleague from my first job out of college, back when I was still figuring out what kind of analyst I wanted to be. He'd gone into estate law. We'd stayed in touch over the years. Professional lunches, holiday cards, the kind of friendship built on mutual respect rather than shared history. I told him I needed advice on estate planning. My own estate, I said. Daniel and I were thinking about the future. He didn't ask questions. He just scheduled a meeting for that Friday. His office was downtown, clean lines, glass walls, the kind of space that made you feel like everything was under control. He offered me coffee. I accepted. We sat across from each other at a polished conference table. So, he said, estate planning. You and Daniel thinking about kids? Maybe eventually, but that's not why I'm here. I slid the folder across the table. The property deed, the tax records, the bank statements, everything organized with labeled tabs. I need to understand my legal standing regarding my parents' estate, specifically this property. Marcus opened the folder. He read through the first few pages in silence. His expression stayed neutral, but I saw the moment he understood. The slight pause, the way his eyes moved back to reread a section. This is a family trust, he said. Yes, and you're listed as a beneficiary, along with my brother. He flipped to the signature clause, read it carefully, then looked up at me. Any major transaction requires all beneficiaries to sign off. That's my understanding. Have your parents discussed selling or transferring the property? Not officially, but they've made it clear they plan to give it to my brother, entirely. Without your consent? They haven't asked for my consent. They've assumed I'd agree. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He was quiet for a moment, thinking, calculating. If they try to transfer ownership without your signature, the transaction is void. You could challenge it in court. You'd win. I know. But you're not here to challenge a transfer. You're here to prevent one. Yes. He looked at me, really looked at me. We'd known each other for 10 years. He'd seen me handle difficult clients, navigate complex negotiations, stay calm under pressure. But this was different. This was personal. What do you want to do, Chloe? I want to file a formal inquiry, a legal letter stating my position as a beneficiary and requesting full disclosure of any planned transactions involving the property. That will effectively freeze any sale or transfer until you agree. I understand. It will also make your position very clear to your family. There's no walking this back. I know. Marcus nodded slowly. I can draft the letter. It'll take a few days. Thank you. Can I ask you something? I waited. Is this about the house? Or is it about something else? I thought about that, about the car, about the $63,000, about the hidden retirement fund, about 32 years of being invisible. It's about accountability, I said. He drafted the letter. Professional, precise, no emotion. Just legal language stating my rights as a beneficiary and requesting formal notification of any planned transactions. A procedural inquiry. Nothing more. I read it 3 times. Then I signed it. My hand was steady. My signature clear. The moment this letter was delivered, everything would change. My parents would know I'd found the loophole. They'd know I wasn't going to stay quiet. They'd know their plan was dead. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply enforcing the contract they had broken. I had the power to ruin them financially, to expose their lies to everyone they knew. But the question that kept me up at night wasn't whether I could do it, but whether I should. Is there a line between justice and cruelty? Even when the cruelty was first inflicted on you? The letter was delivered on a Wednesday. Certified mail. Signature required. Marcus had arranged it through his firm's courier service. Professional. Traceable. Impossible to ignore. I knew the moment they received it. My mother called at 2:15 in the afternoon. I was in a meeting. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 2:20, then 2:25. Then my father called. I waited until 5 o'clock to call back. My mother answered on the first ring. "Chloe, what is this? What have you done?" Her voice was high, panicked, not angry yet, just confused. "I filed a formal inquiry regarding the family trust. It's standard procedure." Standard procedure? "Chloe, this is a legal letter from a lawyer." "Yes, I thought it was important to have professional documentation." "Documentation of what?" "My rights as a beneficiary. The trust requires all parties to consent to any major transactions. I'm simply requesting disclosure. We're not selling the house. Then there's nothing to worry about." Silence. I could hear her breathing, fast, shallow. "Your father wants to talk to you." The phone rustled, then my father's voice, lower, controlled. But I could hear the edge underneath. "Chloe, what's going on?" I explained it to Mom. "I filed an inquiry about the trust." "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm a beneficiary. I have a legal right to know about any planned transactions." "There are no planned transactions." "Then the letter is just a formality." "It's not a formality. It's a threat. It's a legal document. If you have questions about it, you should contact Marcus Chen. His information is at the bottom of the letter." "I don't need to contact a lawyer. I need to talk to my daughter." "I am your daughter, and I'm telling you to contact my lawyer." Another silence, longer this time. "Why are you doing this?" His voice was quieter now, almost pleading. I thought about all the answers I could give, about the car, about the money, about the hidden retirement fund, about the house they'd planned to give away without asking me, about 32 years of being second. But those weren't the real reasons. Those were just the evidence. "Because you never asked," I said. "Asked what?" "If I was okay with it. Any of it. You just assumed I'd go along, that I'd stay quiet, that I wouldn't notice. Chloe, we're your parents. We've always done what we thought was best. For Liam. You've always done what was best for Liam. That's not fair." "It's true." My father exhaled, long and slow. I could picture him standing in the kitchen, one hand on the counter, the other holding the phone, trying to figure out how to fix this. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to follow the law. The trust requires my signature for any major transaction. If you're planning to transfer the house to Liam, I need to consent. And if we ask for your consent, then I'll consider it after full financial disclosure." "Full financial disclosure?" "Bank statements, tax returns, asset liquidation records, everything." "You want to audit us?" "I want transparency. The same transparency you'd require from any financial transaction." He was quiet. I knew what he was thinking, that I'd found something, that I knew about the retirement fund, that I wasn't the daughter who stayed quiet anymore. "I need to talk to your mother," he said finally. "That's fine. but any formal communication should go through Marcus. Chloe, I have to go, Dad. I have plans tonight. I didn't have plans, but I needed to end the call. I needed to not hear whatever he was going to say next, whatever plea or guilt trip or accusation he'd prepared. I hung up. The apartment was quiet. Daniel was working late. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea I didn't drink and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Why are you doing this to us? I looked at the message for a long time. I was doing it for the 8-year-old girl who didn't get to go to math camp because her brother needed tutoring, for the 14-year-old who graduated with honors and got dinner at a chain restaurant, for the 25-year-old who bought her own condo while her parents funded her brother's third failed business. I was doing it for every version of myself that had been told to understand, to be patient, to be the bigger person. I didn't text back. I arranged the lunch for a Sunday afternoon, a nice restaurant, private room, natural light, the kind of place where people speak in measured tones and everything feels civilized. I invited my parents, Liam, Daniel's parents, Margaret and Thomas, and 2 family friends, the Harpers. Richard Harper had been my father's college roommate. His wife, Linda, had known my mother for 30 years. They were the kind of people whose opinion mattered, whose respect my parents valued. I framed it as a belated wedding celebration, something intimate, a chance for both families to connect properly. My mother sounded relieved when I called, like maybe the legal letter had been a misunderstanding, like maybe things could go back to normal. They arrived on time. Everyone did. The room was set with a long table, flowers in the center, menus already placed. I'd ordered wine, appetizers, everything perfect. The small talk started immediately. Margaret asked about the honeymoon. Linda complimented my dress. My father shook hands with Thomas and talked about golf. Liam sat at the far end, quiet, checking his phone. We ordered. The food came. The conversation flowed. Polite, safe, exactly what everyone expected. Then during the main course, I set down my fork. I wanted to thank you all for coming. There's actually something I'd like to discuss, a family matter. But I value all of your perspectives, so I thought this would be a good time. My mother's smile froze. My father's hand paused halfway to his glass. It's about the family estate, specifically the property trust. Richard leaned forward slightly. He'd been an estate attorney before he retired. The house? Yes, I recently discovered some discrepancies in the property records, tax exemptions, asset transfers. I wanted to make sure I was understanding everything correctly. I pulled out a folder from my bag, clean, organized, the same documents I'd shown Marcus. For example, there's a homestead exemption filed 2 years ago. It lists Liam as a co-resident, which reduces the property tax burden significantly. But according to the trust document, any change in residency status requires disclosure to all beneficiaries. I slid the first document across the table. Richard picked it up. His eyes scanned the page. I wasn't notified, I continued, which made me curious about what else I might have missed. My mother's face had gone pale. Chloe, this isn't the time. I also found some interesting patterns in the financial records. Large asset liquidations over the past 3 years. Stocks, bonds, a rental property. The proceeds went into a separate account. I slid another document, this time toward Thomas. He was a retired judge, calm, analytical, the kind of person who looked at facts, not emotions. The total is about $200,000, which is fine, of course, it's their money. But it's interesting given that they've been claiming financial hardship, asking me to co-sign loans for Liam, telling me they need to give him the house because they have nothing else. Linda's fork clinked against her plate. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding anything, especially the tax implications. Because if someone claims financial hardship to qualify for exemptions while maintaining a 6-figure savings account, that could be considered, I paused, let the word hang there, problematic. I handed the final document to Thomas. He took it slowly. His expression didn't change, but I saw his eyes narrow as he read. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting the tax evasion part. My mother gasped, actually gasped. Her hand went to her throat. My father pushed back from the table. This is inappropriate. This is a family matter. It is a family matter, I said. That's why I invited family and trusted friends who might help us understand the legal and ethical implications. Thomas set the document down carefully. He looked at my father, then at me. His face was unreadable. These are serious allegations, Chloe. They're not allegations. They're facts. Documented, verifiable. I'm simply asking for clarity. The room was silent. No one was eating anymore. Everyone was looking at the documents. At my parents. At me. The truth, delivered calmly, is the sharpest weapon. And I just used it. My father started to speak, but Liam cut him off. Wait, wait! Liam's voice was sharp, panicked. What does this mean? For the house? I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in years, he was paying attention. It means the house can't be transferred without my signature. The trust requires all beneficiaries to consent. But they promised it to me. They can't promise what they don't have the legal right to give. His face went red. He turned to our parents. You said it was handled. You said it was all set up. My mother reached for his hand. Liam, honey, we'll figure this out. Figure it out? She just said I can't have it. You've been telling me for 2 years that the house was mine, that I'd finally have something stable, something I could build on. My father's jaw tightened. This isn't the place. You made me dependent on this. Liam's voice rose. People at nearby tables were starting to look. You told me not to worry about money, not to stress about jobs, that you'd take care of everything. And now you're telling me you can't? The irony was so thick I could taste it. The golden child, finally realizing he'd been set up to fail. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. I kept my voice calm, level. This affects everyone here. My in-laws, our family friends, people who've watched this dynamic play out for years. They deserve to understand what's been happening. Linda was staring at my mother. Sarah, is this true? You were planning to give Liam the entire estate? My mother's hands were shaking. It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said. It's documented. The homestead exemption, the hidden savings account, the pattern of financial transfers. All of it points to a plan to cut me out while claiming poverty. Thomas set down the documents. His expression was grave. These are serious ethical violations, potentially legal ones. My father stood up. We don't have to sit here and be accused. You're not being accused, I said. You're being exposed. There's a difference. Margaret, who'd been silent until now, spoke quietly. Chloe, what do you want? Finally, the right question. I want fairness. I want the estate split legally and equally. I want full financial disclosure. And I want all financial support for Liam to stop immediately. Liam's head snapped toward me. You're cutting me off? I'm not cutting you off. They are, or they should have years ago. You're doing this because you're jealous, because you've always been jealous. I almost laughed. Almost. I'm doing this because I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of working for everything while you're handed everything. I'm tired of being told I'm selfish for wanting what was promised to me. My mother was crying now. Real tears, not the performance kind. Chloe, please. We're your family. Then act like it. Treat me like family. Not like a backup plan, not like a resource, like a daughter. The silence that followed was complete. Even Liam had stopped talking. I stood up, gathered my folder, straightened my dress. My lawyer will send over the paperwork, a formal division of assets, equal shares. If you agree and sign, I'll consent to whatever you want to do with your portion. If you don't, the trust stays frozen. Your choice. I looked at each of them. My parents, Liam, the witnesses to this moment. I'll be in touch. I walked toward the door. Daniel followed. I could feel everyone's eyes on my back. My father's voice stopped me. Quiet. Defeated. You won. I turned back. Looked at him one last time. I didn't win. I just stopped losing. Then I left. The paperwork arrived 3 weeks later. Marcus called to tell me it had been signed. All of it. The division of assets, the formal acknowledgement of the trust requirements, the agreement to cease all financial support for Liam effective immediately. My parents had complied with every term. I sat in my office when Marcus told me. The city stretched out below, clean lines, organized streets, everything in its place. They didn't fight it? I asked. No. Their attorney advised them not to. The evidence was too clear. And after that lunch, well, word travels. Word did travel. Linda Harper had told her book club. Richard had mentioned it to colleagues. By the end of the week, everyone in their social circle knew. Not the details exactly, but enough. Enough to know that Sarah and Robert Clark had been caught in a financial deception, that they'd planned to cheat their own daughter. The damage wasn't legal, it was social. And for people like my parents, that was worse. My mother tried calling twice. I didn't answer. My father sent a single text. "We did what you asked. I hope you're satisfied." I didn't reply. Liam's downfall was faster and messier. Without the promise of the house, without the safety net of my parents' money, he had to face reality. He tried to start the food truck business anyway. He borrowed money from friends. It failed in 6 weeks. Then he tried to move back home. My parents, finally learning their lesson, said no. He called me once, late at night, drunk or high or both. "You ruined my life," he said. "No, I just stopped funding it." He hung up. I heard through Margaret that he'd moved in with a friend, that he'd gotten a job at a warehouse, that he was angry and bitter and blaming everyone but himself. I felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just a quiet sense of distance. The legal settlement gave me exactly half of the liquid assets, $86,000. Not the full amount they'd hidden, but half of what remained after legal fees and taxes. I put it in a separate account. I didn't need it, but it was mine. Legally. Finally. The house remained in the trust, frozen until my parents died. When that happened, it would be split. 50-50. Liam would get his half. I would get mine. Equal, fair, legal. I signed the final papers on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus witnessed. Daniel stood beside me. My hand was steady, my signature clear. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked later over dinner. I thought about it. Really thought about it. "Free," I said. And I was. The revenge hadn't been about taking anything from them. It had been about taking back what was mine. My dignity, my agency, my right to be treated fairly. The email came 2 months later, late at night, from my mother's address. The subject line was blank. I opened it. It was long, rambling, full of justifications and blame. She said I'd destroyed the family, that I'd embarrassed them, that I'd been cruel and heartless, that they'd only ever tried to help Liam because he needed it more, that I'd never understood what it was like to struggle, that I'd always been cold and calculating. She said she didn't know who I'd become. I read it twice, slowly, carefully. Then I moved it to trash. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. The silence was the only response they deserved. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, went to bed. Daniel was already asleep. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. I lay there in the dark, thinking about the girl I used to be, the one who believed that if she just worked hard enough, achieved enough, stayed quiet enough, she'd finally be seen. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth, who understood that fairness isn't given, it's claimed. Someone who'd learned that the most powerful thing you can do is stop accepting less than you deserve. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I slept through the night. I used the settlement money to buy a car, not a practical sedan like the one my in-laws had given me, not something sensible and reliable and invisible. A car I actually wanted, something that felt like mine. It was a deep blue hybrid, leather seats, sunroof. The kind of car I'd always told myself was too extravagant, too indulgent, too much. But it wasn't too much. It was exactly right. Daniel came with me to pick it up. The dealership was bright and clean. The salesman handed me the keys with a smile. I sat in the driver's seat and adjusted the mirrors. Everything was new. Everything was mine. How does it feel? Daniel asked. Like freedom, I said. And it did. We drove home with the sunroof open, the city spread out around us. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who packed lunches and drove old cars and saved every penny because she had to, because no one was going to help her, because she'd learned early that the only person she could rely on was herself. That girl had been strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for. But she'd also been alone. I wasn't alone anymore. Not because I'd found someone to save me, but because I'd learned to save myself. And in doing that, I'd found someone who wanted to walk beside me, not behind me or ahead of me, beside me. Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. I didn't ask why. I knew. The apartment felt different when we got back, lighter, like something heavy had been lifted. I made dinner. We ate on the couch and watched a movie. Normal things, simple things, the kind of life I'd always wanted but never thought I deserved. My phone buzzed once, a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it, saw the first few words. Something about family, something about forgiveness. I deleted it without reading the rest. There was nothing left to say. No explanation that would change what had happened. No apology that would undo 32 years of neglect. No promise that would make me believe things would be different. I'd spent my whole life waiting for them to see me, to value me, to treat me like I mattered. But I didn't need them to anymore. I saw myself. I valued myself. I knew I mattered. That was enough. The weeks turned into months. Work continued. Life continued. I got a promotion. Daniel and I started talking about buying a house. Our house. Something we'd choose together. Something that would be ours from the beginning. I stopped checking my email for messages from my family. I stopped wondering if they'd call. I stopped carrying the weight of their expectations and their disappointments and their failures. I let it all go. And in the space where that weight used to be, I found something I'd never had before. Peace. Real peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of choice. The ability to decide what I would accept and what I wouldn't. Who I would let into my life and who I would leave behind. I'd learned that boundaries aren't cruel. They're necessary. That saying no isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. That walking away from people who hurt you isn't giving up. It's growing up. One Saturday morning, I got in my car and drove. No destination, no plan, just the open road and the sunroof and the feeling of possibility. I looked in the rearview mirror. The city was behind me. The past was behind me. Everything that had weighed me down and held me back was finally, truly behind me. The road ahead stretched out clean and clear. And it was mine. All mine. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I miss my family. The answer is always the same. No. Not because I'm heartless, not because I don't understand the value of family, but because I finally understand the value of myself. For 32 years, I believed that family meant sacrifice, that love meant accepting less, that being the responsible one meant being the invisible one. I believed that if I just kept trying, kept achieving, kept proving myself, eventually they'd see me. But they never did. And the truth is, they never would have. Because the problem wasn't me. It never was. The problem was a system they'd built where one child mattered more than the other, where fairness was optional, where my worth was measured by how much I could give and how little I would ask for in return. I didn't destroy that system with anger or cruelty. I destroyed it with truth, with documentation, with the quiet, steady application of facts and consequences. The revenge wasn't taking their money. It wasn't ruining their reputation. It wasn't even exposing their hypocrisy, though that happened naturally. The revenge was reclaiming my own life, my own worth, my own right to be treated with basic human dignity. That's what they couldn't forgive. Not the legal letters or the public exposure or the frozen assets. What they couldn't forgive was that I'd stopped playing my role. I'd stopped being the daughter who accepted everything and asked for nothing. I'd stopped being convenient, and in doing that, I'd become free. Daniel and I bought a house 6 months later, a small place with a backyard and good light. We planted a garden, we adopted a dog. We built a life that had nothing to do with my parents or Liam or any of the weight I'd carried for so long. Sometimes I think about them, wonder if they ever understood what they'd done, if they ever looked at each other and realized that their favoritism hadn't helped Liam at all, that it had crippled him, made him dependent and entitled and unable to function without someone else's money propping him up. I don't think they did. People like that rarely do. They're too invested in their own narrative, too committed to the idea that they were good parents who just made difficult choices. But I know the truth, and that's enough. I learned something important through all of this, that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, by reciprocity, by the willingness to see each other as whole, valuable human beings. My parents never gave me that, but I gave it to myself. And in doing so, I found people who could give it to me too. Daniel, his family, friends who showed up when it mattered. That's my family now, the one I chose, the one that chose me back. I'm sitting on my porch as I tell you this. The sun is setting. The dog is asleep at my feet. Daniel is inside making dinner. The smell of garlic and tomatoes drifts through the open window. This is peace, real peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of choice. The knowledge that I control my own life, that I set my own boundaries, that I decide who gets access to my time, my energy, my love. They had taught me a painful lesson about love, but I had taught myself a far more valuable one about power. The power to say no, the power to walk away, the power to choose myself. And that's where my story ends. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, hard-won peace. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you a moment of validation or a quiet sense of empowerment, then that's the greatest reward I could ask for. Thank you for listening. And if you'd like to hear more stories of quiet triumphs and hard-won justice, please like and subscribe. It means more than you know. The sun dips below the horizon. The sky turns purple and gold. I take a breath, let it out slowly. I am finally completely beautifully free.